welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And this is Randy Fischer, and we are the FAIRtax guys. And again, we got a little bit of a delay. Ron has still been exiled from the studio here, still on vacation in New York, and we'll have him back here in a couple of weeks. But thanks to the beauty of the internet and technology, we can see your face on the screen back there behind us. So you're still having good weather up there?
Yeah, it's excellent. Yeah, it's excellent. Yeah, so can't complain. It's a little cooler than it is in Florida.
All right. Well, just bring a little bit of that back with you. We can stand to have a little bit of coolness here. But again, as we always do on the FAIRtax Power Radio, we would like to give folks the opportunity to interact with us. Send us an email at thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. That's thefairtaxguys, all one word, at gmail.com. You can like our Facebook page. You can like the Facebook Live page that we've been on in the past little bit. The general page. What do they call that? The national page?
Yeah, the FAIRtax official page.
There's the word I was looking for. Yeah. One of those senior moments here when things are like that. And so we do appreciate your interaction. We love to answer your questions about the fair tax. And we love the fact that when people have questions about the fair tax, that means that they're engaged, that they want to learn about it. And the only way that we're going to get rid of the income tax is when there are enough people out there who understand the fair tax and demand it from your Congress critters. That's just the only way it's going to happen.
And since this will be played live on Facebook, we will be monitoring it and responding to any questions or comments.
All right.
Yeah. Good. Sounds good.
Ron, you look like you had something you wanted to say back there. So we're
Randy
all right.
said it.
Randy said it. Okay.
Yep.
Well, this time I'm not going to wait until the last couple of minutes of the episode to bring out the income tax, the flat tax, which has just as much potential to become as a mutt mess as that one is, and the fair tax. I love this visual medium. We can bring our stuff like that up there. And,
Bob,
yes,
on that income tax Rubik's Cube there, all right? So the big tax plan that they did in December, how would you represent that with your Rubik's Cube?
Oh, you would like me to illustrate what they did with this big thing that passed in December that was supposed to be
be-all and end-all, the greatest tax reform in a generation that ends everything.
This is what they did.
Yeah, that's about it.
It's still as complicated as it ever was. You still have to file a tax return. You still have withholding. You still have payroll taxes. The government still thinks it's everybody's highest spending priority. It is still being evaded to the tune of billions of dollars a year. They didn't fix anything. They did give us some relief. It was nice to see that the corporate tax rate went down significantly. And, Randy, we saw what the result of that was as far as companies giving bonuses.
And
like
job
that.
and wage.
And the jobs went up.
And
now, if cutting it back from 39 to 21 does that, what do you think cutting it from 21 to 0 will do?
It would just make it go like a skyrocket.
Yep.
Rocket fuel for the economy, because that's exactly what it
Now, there's one more feature of this that it would be nice to have to truly represent the tax code, and that is if the colors would change we just hold it.
Yeah.
So it would actually change positions, change colors as it's being held.
Oh, yeah. And as I say, we mentioned Congress.gov. You can go there and use their search function, search on the string Internal Revenue Code, and see. I don't think we mentioned our number last episode when we were talking about the bill to exclude from gross income certain federally subsidized loan repayments for dental school faculty. They're getting a carve out. And also from excluding the major sports organizations from becoming tax-exempt organizations. And but the number we got is there are, in this 115th Congress, 1,392 is the number of hits you get when you search on the string Internal Revenue Code and see what the Congress critters are trying to do to the tax code.
Yeah, what that means, folks, is that in this 115th Congress, which started in January of 2017, there are almost just under 1,400 proposals to change the tax code. And even though they did this big tax reform in December, supposedly, tax relief, whatever you want to call it.
No, it's not tax reform. Tax relief is what it was.
Yeah.
Tax Cuts Jobs Act is the name of it.
Yeah.
The Tax Cuts Jobs Act.
And they're already trying to figure out how to fix it. You know?
Well, and they're already writing the rules. They're up to 400 pages on writing rules, and they haven't even touched the surface of it yet.
And there was another article that I saw in which they're concerned with it's not revenue neutral. It's not going to bring into the government. I mean, of course, the government could never think about cutting spending. Oh my gosh, But still, it's not revenue neutral. The fair tax is revenue neutral. All right. When we go to the fair tax, it doesn't cut spending for the government. All right. It is revenue neutral. So it doesn't have that problem that this tax plan does.
And this show is about mid-year in the congressional calendar. So you can look at close to 3,000 proposed bills to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 before year end.
Well, I tell you what, the carve out for the dental school faculty, again, I think that's almost as much fun as the redefinition of municipal solid waste.
Yeah. That's the champion.
To illustrate how absurd the United States tax code is. It's just insane. And it happens that way because we the people stand for it. If we the people stand up to our Congress critters and say, we don't want that thing anymore, get rid of it, jerk it out by the roots, and replace it with a 133-page fair tax bill. Most of that 133 pages, though, is reference to current tax statutes that will be repealed. It does not take 133 pages to describe the fair tax. It's just simply part of the price of everything you buy for new goods and services, collected by the state.
Yes.
And so the Internal Revenue Service goes away, the income tax goes away, tax returns go away, withholding goes away. All the nasty stuff that we get with the income tax goes away with the fair tax in the government. As Ron said, it's a revenue neutral proposal. It will bring in the same amount of revenue for the government that the income tax does. Why are we doing it the hard way? I don't understand that.
Yeah, well, we know why, don't we?
Yes, because the Congress critters get a lot of money from the lobbyists, and they write the tax code.
Well, let me clarify one thing. You said collected by the states. Actually, it's collected by the most efficient engine in the world, and that is the United States retail businesses.
The businesses will collect it and remit it to the state revenue agencies.
And over 90% of that collection will be electronic because we are going to fewer and fewer cash transactions.
So it's anonymous. Here in Florida, we have no state income tax, so we support the state government strictly with the sales tax, and the government has no clue who's paying it. All they know is that they're getting the money, and that's let's make that work on the federal level with a fair tax.
Make the comment too. People say, "Well, how do we know it's going to work?" Well, because it is working. All right, like I'm in New York right now. I moved out of New York over 20 years ago. New York has a sales tax. They have an income tax. They have every tax that you can think of. And what's happening is that I think I saw on Stuart Varney something like 800,000 people a year are moving out of the states like New York, Illinois, California that have every tax you can think of. And they're moving to tax states that don't have an income tax like Florida, Tennessee, and Texas. All right. So, the fair tax is working already in the states that don't have an income tax. So, we know it's going to work.
Yeah, and the result of the corporate tax cut that went through in December has shown what the result is going to be. There were some naysayers that said, the businesses are just going to pocket that windfall. No, they don't.
Yeah.
Right. I think over 3,000 businesses have given either wage increases or bonuses to their employees.
Wow.
And so imagine what would happen if the corporate tax goes away entirely. And with the corporate tax goes away entirely, the compliance costs go away entirely as well. Talking about the money they have to pay for their tax accountants and lawyers and all of the time, which is worth money, that they spend complying with the tax code, that goes away. The cost of doing business goes down dramatically with a fair tax. And, of course, those savings and the competitive pressures in the free market are going to push those savings through to the consumer where the fair tax is added back at the consumer level. So prices at the retail level with a fair tax may be a tad higher than they are now, but nowhere near the 23% that some people are telling you that's going to be.
And everybody will have more purchasing power because they'll get their entire paycheck. They'll get the prebate. All right. And they also have the option of buying used goods, especially for the two big items, their automobiles and their houses. All right. They don't have to buy new. They can buy used and legally avoid the fair tax. So for the people, as I said in the last episode, for the people that most need it, they're going to get the most relief.
All right, well, let's move on and get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about here on this episode of FAIRtax Power Radio. And again, we have brought in our resident expert, Randy Fischer. Thank you so much for being with us. And he has done a good bit of research on the subject that has been in the news a whole lot recently, the T word, tariffs. You know, we have
actually it's two T words: tariffs and trade wars.
Okay, well, I say, that you hear a lot about that in the news, that the president is slapping tariffs on this Chinese steel and Chinese aluminum and stuff like that, and people are saying, "Oh, we're going to start a trade war. That's going to be awful." So we're going to talk a bit about, Randy especially, what the effect of tariffs are on the economy now, and why the fair tax would be a much, much better solution to what these tariffs are trying to accomplish. Have at it.
Well, let's start with one universal concept, and there's one fact that everybody should understand. A tariff is a tax paid by the consumer in the country where the tariff is imposed. So when the United States government says we're going to put a 25% on tariff on Chinese steel, that does not hurt the consumers in China. They don't pay that tax. The Chinese government doesn't pay that tax. The American consumers of steel pay that tax. So just like any other tax, it becomes an embedded cost in the goods and services that we consumers buy. The tariff puts money in the government's pocket, and it takes money from the consumer's pocket. And there's a lot of effects to that. And one of the effects is it lowers consumption in the United States. People buy less stuff because the stuff they buy is going to cost more. And when they buy less stuff, that hurts every business in the chain of commerce for goods and services. It hurts the waitress down at the corner deli or restaurant because there's fewer people out there buying stuff and putting that money back into the stream of commerce. There's less stuff being bought. Mm-hmm. So the idea of a tariff only sounds good to a government versus government because they know that there's a point at which those tariffs are going to hurt the other government enough to where they're going to come to their senses and say, let's go back to where things were. Let's take off those extra tariffs that were imposed on steel, aluminum.
Yeah. Because if you impose a tariff on me, I'm going to turn around and do the same thing back to you.
You almost have to up to a point. And so there's a quick disadvantage to tariffs because that hurts the ability of U.S. businesses who import car parts, for example, who import unprocessed aluminum, sheets of aluminum, to make the goods out of those raw materials at a price that U.S. consumers can afford.
Hey, Randy?
Yes, sir.
Speaking of unfair advantage, how does the current tax system affect our companies, when they're shipping overseas?
Well, what we have are an inherent disadvantage to our companies when they get ready to ship a product overseas and export it. It has about 18 to 24% higher cost at export because of the embedded payroll taxes, the embedded income taxes, the embedded investment taxes, and the major embedded component are the compliance costs for those taxes. The payroll, income, and investment taxes all have a compliance cost. So when they ship that car out of the U.S. to be sold in France, the cost of that car going into France is 18 to 24% higher than it would be if it was being purchased here in the United States, which makes our U.S. vehicles at a higher cost overseas, because then another tax gets added to it when the French consumer buys it. There's a value-added tax component that's added on by the French government to it. So it's much cheaper for them to buy domestically produced vehicles or vehicles that were produced in a country that do not have those embedded tax costs in their exports. Now, when French wine is shipped to the United States, for example, it comes to the U.S. without that value-added tax because the government has stripped that tax out when it's an export from their country coming into our country. So that gives that French wine a tax advantage over a U.S. produced wine. Their products on import are advantaged. Our products on exports are disadvantaged. And that's just with the tax system we have now, without considering the compounding of that disadvantage by adding an export tax.
Yeah, if you start putting tariffs on top of that stuff, it makes it even. And that's a beautiful illustration of how all the corporate taxes roll down to the consumer anyway.
Right.
So the people who are saying, well, the fair tax gets rid of the corporate income tax, that's no fair. Those folks should pay taxes on their profits. No, they don't pay taxes on their profits. They roll that cost down to you.
And only individuals pay taxes. It may be individual workers, it may be individual investors, and it's certainly individual consumers. Mm-hmm. But all taxes are paid by individuals. And that's the one, it's a law of physics, basically. Mm-hmm. It doesn't change no matter what else you do to the system, it's still paid by a consumer.
And that's a very, very important point to get across to people, especially, as Bob mentioned, those people who say, well, the corporations have to pay their fair share. The rich have to pay their fair share. It is the consumer, or the employee or the investor, but it is people, individuals who always pay these taxes. Always. There's no exceptions.
All right. Let's get into the meat and potatoes here. How is the fair tax a better solution than a tariff?
Well, the fair tax, first of all, it completely eliminates the payroll tax. It completely eliminates the federal income tax. It eliminates any taxes on investment returns or gains, and it eliminates the compliance costs associated with those.
That's the biggie.
So when you roll that together, you've got the cost of doing business for American businesses is going to be somewhere between 18 and 24% lower than it was when those taxes were still in the system. Now, the retailers in particular are going to have an advantage because the only tax compliance they have to do is something that they're already doing in 45 states.
Yeah.
And that is collect a simple flat rate sales tax on the end point of sale to a retail consumer of a new good or service.
Something their point of sale software does for them already.
Exactly. And it's something that is easy to apply to services as it is to new goods. Mm-hmm. Used goods are not taxed. Taxes, there's no taxes for business to business services. So if I'm running a business and I'm renting from another business, there's no fair tax on my business rent.
Yeah. If your business does not, sell to retail consumers, your tax compliance is none. There is nothing to deal with.
So now on an export of a U.S. product, that product is going out of the United States with no embedded taxes, and it's going into the country of origin at a lower price, and probably at a lower price than what it is in the country that it's being sold into. Mm-hmm. For those same products that are made domestically. And if they put a tariff on our products going into their country, and that raises the price up, then we obviously are putting an end point of sale cost on their import, on anything we import, as the fair tax adds 23% inclusive, 30% exclusive to the cost of that imported product. So those imported products, even if they don't have a value-added tax on them when they're imported, get the fair tax added to them, and that puts that product on a level playing field with our U.S. products.
And what does that do for American jobs when American products are more competitive on the global market?
It makes the jobs
That's your
grow.
rocket fuel for the jobs figures.
Absolutely, and it makes the wages for those workers grow. And it makes the ability of those workers to save for their retirement grow, because they're saving untaxed dollars that are not going to be taxed until they spend those dollars at the time that they retire. And they're getting their prebate. So they're not paying any tax unreimbursed until they decide to spend more than the poverty level to feed, clothe, and house their family.
Yeah, so the fair tax is a much better deal than tariffs all the way around.
Well, it really will make tariffs unnecessary, in my opinion. I think that, as a political matter, countries may still impose tariffs in order to protect their domestic manufacturers, but I think they're going to find that that the tariffs are just not as necessary politically anymore. Their consumers are going to be buying domestic products where they like the domestic better. They're going to be buying imported products where there's a better product and a better supply of that product. So I think you can see a lot of this nonsense about tariffs and trade wars slowly disappearing as the fair tax gets implemented and as people get comfortable with it.
Well, if the businesses around the world see what the fair tax would do for American business, how many others do you think will adopt something similar?
I think they almost have to at some point. The idea of them continuing to keep a multi-level value-added tax, and that's a European-style value-added tax. So when the farmer goes out and turns seed into wheat, he's added a value to that product, and that's taxed. When that wheat gets to the miller and the miller turns that wheat into flour, he adds a value-added tax to it. The people that make the bags for the flour to get it to the baker, all of those people are adding a value to it, and there's a value-added tax that's added on. It's a complicated, compounded system full of potential for exclusions and exemptions, and that's why we never want a value-added tax in the United States.
All right.
Yeah, the value-added tax adds a lot of complexity, which is what the governing bodies, such as our Congress, love, because they love to work behind the scenes and cultivate friendships with these lobbyists and so forth. So a VAT tax would be just as bad. And in fact, there are some people in Congress who would love a VAT tax with the income tax. Very bad idea.
No.
All right. But they like the idea. And the other side of this, the fair tax, it's just one more example of how the fair tax makes life simpler in so many different ways.
And again, let me mention that as of the date we're recording this, 1,392 hits on Congress.gov is what you will get if you search on the string Internal Revenue Code. You talk about cozy relationship with lobbyists. I want to find out who is behind the one for the exclusion for dental school faculty. We mentioned that last time. That's a zinger. That's going to get a lot of play here on FAIRtax Power Radio. Oh, Mercer. I tell you what, we got about 5 minutes left in today's program. Let's kind of tease a little bit what's up next week. Next week is the 4th of July.
Yeah.
And we have got a special FAIRtax Power Radio 4th of July version for you. Which of you gentlemen want to dig into that?
Now go ahead, Randy.
Well, it's a program where, in my mind at least, we take ourselves back to the founding. And we talk about the natural rights that we have as a citizen that are taken away from us by the income tax system. And we talk about the fact that you have a right to trial by jury. No, under the income tax system, you don't. You have a right to be free from the search and seizure of your papers and your records. And no, you really don't, under the income tax system, have that right. You have a right to not be forced to testify against yourself and self-incrimination. You have a right to speak freely in a church. If you want to make a point as a pastor in a church, that you have a right of free speech in a church. And in fact, under the Johnson Amendment and the Internal Revenue Code, that church's tax-exempt status could be called into question and at risk.
So there's a lot to get into next week here on FAIRtax Power Radio, how the income tax harms civil liberties.
Yes.
Goes against the Bill of Rights, spits in the face of the Constitution and all that stuff. That's just really bad here. But Ron, I know that you wanted to talk again about the FAIRtax logo store. Can we do that?
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
There's the address on the bottom of the screen.
Oh, there you go. Great. Wonderful. The FAIRtax logo store, we've taken to calling it the FAIRtax promotional closet because it's a closet full of goodies. I mean, you never know what you're going to find, but there is the website. You can go there. Show your support for the FAIRtax, please. All right. We're only going to get this done when it's obvious to Congress that millions of people are demanding the FAIRtax. And you can do that. You can buy a hat, a shirt, there's all kinds of mugs, pens, pencils. You can buy the palm cards. They're about, 4x7, something like that. And they got lots of good information. You can buy a bunch of those, hand them out to your friends. The business size cards, what we call the prebate cards. There's just more promotional stuff in there than you can imagine. And that's a great way to show your support, all right? We don't really make a lot of money at it. It's for us, it's considered an advertising expense. But it's important that you show your support for this, especially, as Bob has mentioned, at town halls and so forth. When my congressman sees my wife and I come in to a town hall, we're always wearing our FAIRtax gear. He knows he's going to get a question about the FAIRtax. Fortunately,
you're fortunate. Your congressman is a co-sponsor, and not just a co-sponsor, but an avid supporter. We're talking about Ted Yoho here in Florida District 3.
Yep.
So we need more guys like him in Congress. Let me set up one more thing for you. Ebates.
Oh, yes, Ebates. This is a great way to support the Americans for Fair Taxation. You've seen their ads on TV. You go to ebates.com. You sign up for it, start, and then when you do shopping, you'll get a small stipend. And after you set it up with your name and address, you can go in there and deflect the rebates that you're going to get to the Americans for Fair Taxation. It's a great way to support them because we're all volunteers and we don't have a lot of, we have enough money coming in, the national group. But if we're going to be running ads on TV, we're going to need quite a bit more money. And that's,
let me back up a little bit on that last statement as far as money coming in. And I want to make sure people understand that both the Americans for Fair Taxation and the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association are nonprofits.
Yeah.
There is no one making a salary out of the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association, nor are there any salaried employees of the Americans for Fair Taxation. They're all volunteers. We do have a couple contractors. We maintain 2 websites, and we maintain a database with a customer relations manager system on the national level. And so we have expenses, and we incur expenses to keep our nonprofit status in 50 states.
Yep, and that's about going to wrap it up. We are just about out of time here on FAIRtax Power Radio. Powered by Excluded, let me mention that. Excluded, XCLUDED.com. FAIRtax guys are proud to be associated with them now. And so again, until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Mulhero.
And
I'm Randy Fischer.
The FAIRtax guys are reminding you that the FAIRtax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
you will demand it.
Amen.
These income tax forms are way too complicated. There's got to be a better way. are you?
We're the FAIRtax guys.
We've got a big solution for you.
What's that?
It's the FAIRtax. Completely eliminates the federal income tax system as we know it. No more withholding, no more payroll taxes, no more tax returns ever, no more IRS. All gone. And I guarantee you, once you understand it,
You'll demand it.
Yes.